Hello and welcome back to another spoiler review of the latest set, March of the Machines. You guys have received my latest one really well, which I highly appreciate. Lots of clicks, people are interested, but good feedback. And yeah, so the last one I did was more or less on the top cards for Constructed, the cards that I really picked out that I really liked. I missed some. I didn't want the video to go more than an hour, so I will cover some of those in this video. And I will also cover some of the cards that I think are less impactful for Constructed, or I don't know, maybe are maybes, but that are interesting and that people are probably more likely interested in having my opinion on and what I think of them, what they will do for the Constructed format, because other streamers, players, content creators are hyped about them or not, and I'll just give my 2 cents to them as well. So we're starting with another white card, Archangel Elspeth. Elspeth comes back here as an angel, 2 in a white, +1 makes a life-linking soldier token. So we have the soldier archetype, of course, the standard, a little synergy there. And then for -2 for Loyalty Planeswalker, you get 2 1/1 counters on a creature. It becomes an angel and it gains flying. So it gains flying permanently, not just for one turn. This is quite nice to push through damage. And then -6, return all non-land permanents card with mana value 3 less from graveyard to the battlefield. So a very quick comparison in standard is going to be Wandering Emperor. Wandering Emperor is a different type of card though. Wandering Emperor is much better defensively, and just more or less in a mid-range shell. I think Archangel Elspeth is less good in a mid-range shell and really screams to you, hey, play me in an aggressive, low-to-the ground creature deck where I top off the curve with Elspeth to, hey, if I don't have anything left, I can just keep plussing Elspeth and then build my board up again. If I do have stuff on the board and I need to push damage, I can -2. And then later on, you even have the -6 in a very long, grindy game if they can't remove Archangel Elspeth. Overall, this card is fine. Like, it's not bad, and I could see it being played in soldiers, but I think it's more likely to have a sideboard slot there, if it even has a slot, because it is 4 mana, it fights with Talia. Talia making it cost 5 is rough. And yeah, I mean, Planeswalkers in the days of Invoke Despair aren't that great. And in itself, this card does not have a huge impact on the board. It kind of needs other stuff to go well. And if you just make 1/1s and you are already behind on board, this card is pretty mediocre. So really just want to play it in low numbers and then bring it in out of the sideboard against a control deck, something like that. Then it is crazy fast these days though. So 4 mana cards have to already be very impactful. And yeah, but I could see it as a 2-off. But I'm not blown away by this card by any means. It's not a broken Planeswalker. It's just a good card, sort of. It is similar to Jaya Fury Negotiator. That card people were really excited about. It had 4 abilities, did a lot of things. But it turned out to just, I don't know, see sideboard play in a couple red decks, but that's about it. Another thing with Elspeth, this card is even more narrow. It's not as mid-rangey as Jaya is, so it really is only going to see play in aggressive white decks, and even then, probably just like 1 or 2 copies in the sideboard, I would assume. Next up is Guardian of Jirapur. Or Girapur, I don't know. A 3 mana 3/3 angel, so pretty decent stats, flying on top, of course. And it comes to play, exile up to 1 other target artifact or creature you control, and then returns into play. So this card might not be as good in standard, but if you look at older formats, there's a lot of creatures that you want to flicker that are cheap, and this costs 3 mana, so it gets hit by Collected Company, get hit by Kayla's Reconstruction. I guess that is pretty important in standard too. And yeah, you do have some things in standard. Spirited Companion comes to mind. Lauren of the Third Path, of course, as things you can flicker for some value. There's also the option to flicker prototypes. So, for example, there's the Assembly Worker prototype. It's a 2/2. You can play the Guardian of Jirapur, and then it flips back into its bigger form at 5/5, and you can do that with all the various prototypes, Steel Seraph and so on. Yeah, I think there's not really a home for this in Standard, I believe, because you wouldn't just put this in mono white mid-range. You want to have cards that are impactful on their own and that don't need synergies otherwise. Steel Seraph or something like that is better, even though you have a couple things to flicker, but you just don't have the amount that you would need to make this card good in terms of targets that you can flicker for value. So if we see more of permanents that have come into play, effects that are very strong, then Guardian of Jirapur could be a nice add-on to an archetype surrounding those. But right now, I don't really see it. Nonetheless, a card that we have in Standard now and should look out for, keep in our heads, especially with Kayla's Reconstruction, to do some fancy things with. Dust Legion Duelist. 2/2 Vigilance, whenever one is gone, put on Dust Legion Duelist, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So people were pretty hyped about this, as at least saw it on Twitter. We were saying like, oh, we have Siege Veteran and Soldiers, we have Rafine, the Scheming Seer in Esper Legends. This card is gonna go out of control, draw a bunch of cards. Yeah. If you look at Esper Legends, for example, you see the 2-drops. The 2-drops that Esper Legends plays are either Talia, Danik, or stuff like Razorlash Transmigrant. Even Ludovic, which, I mean, is comparable to the Dust Legion Duelist in the sense of it's also not great against removal spells, but Ludovic at least has 2 free stat lines, so it works well against the Goblin Shaman coming at you when you're on the draw. This creature is just a 2-mana 2/2. It doesn't have any graveyard recursion. It doesn't have a static ability like Talia does that makes removal spells awkward. It is just a 2-mana 2/2 at face value with Vigilance. Okay, huh? It is not a great card in itself, and that's what I really don't like about it. It just eats up a removal spell cleanly, Blood Type Harvester, whatever it may be. I don't see it. It's one of these Wonderland cards. Hey, if everything is going well in my favor, this card will draw even more cards and snowball out of control. Which is true. I mean, if you're playing on someone with no interaction, you go Dust Legion Duelist into Rafine and they don't kill any of those 2 creatures, you're gonna win the game easily, right? Drawing extra cards, But those situations, hey, you're probably winning with any 2-drop into Rafine, where Rafine sticks. And really, the MVP in that situation is not Dust Legion Duelist, it's Rafine. So, I just don't see it. It's a win more card. It's bad when you don't have the perfect draw. It is vulnerable to removal. I don't like it. Sunder the Gateway. We've been covering Atraxa's Fall in the previous video. This is the 2-mana disenchant that I find notable in much of the machines out of white. It's also a sorcery, but it does incubate 2 when it destroys a non-token artifact and enchantment an opponent controls. And in a pinch, you can just incubate 2 and then transform it immediately, so you at least have a 2-mana 2/2 that blocks an opposing creature. Really bad, of course, but hey, in a pinch it can do that. And in this format, we have a lot, in the Standard format, I should say, we have a lot of various ways of enchantments and artifacts running around. And this is sort of like a Lauren number 4 and 5, maybe, if you're interested, because you don't really want to play Lauren number 4, it's legendary. And yeah, it does answer things on curve, which I really like. For example, if your opponent is on the play and goes Reckoner Bankbuster or goes Skrelv Scythe, you can just blow those up with Sunder the Gateway on curve, get that incubator token, which is value down the line. So innocent looking, but I think it's a pretty good disenchant that might see some play. Drafted Butcher. Yes, the Phyrexian creatures will get a lord in this new set. It enters the battlefield. All Phyrexians you control gain menace. And then, of course, it pumps the creatures that are Phyrexian. And then for 4 mana, you can sacrifice an artifact of creatures. So you can sack an incubator token or whatever it may be, and then return it to the battlefield. Unfortunately, it only works as sorcery, which is a big downside. Against the control deck, you would really want to, or against the deck with lots of interaction, you would really want to do this at instant speed in response to a removal, for example, or in their end step, so you don't get wrecked by a sweeper again. Yeah, this card, nonetheless, combining all 3 abilities and the price on it, it is pretty good. And if we get a Phyrexian deck, I'm looking at black, white, or maybe the absent colors, then this will certainly be a player. And I'm looking to, try it out and see what we have there. I'm not too optimistic, of course, but if you think about it, we've had, since Dominaria, we had a lot of sets with Phyrexians, and there's a huge chunk of creatures with the Phyrexian creature type on them. So we'll see. Maybe we can build a decent, aggressive, slanted deck that is tribal themed around Phyrexians. Bloodfeather Phoenix, a card that I overlooked. I think this card is really strong. So this is a top pick for constructed. 2-mana 2/2 flying, can't block. And when an instant or sorcery spell you control deals damage to an opponent or battle, you may pay 1 red, and if you do, return the Phoenix to the battlefield and also gains haste. This is excellent in a burn deck, in an aggressive mono-red deck with lots of burn spells. You play this on turn 2, and you're really not unhappy if your opponent kills this, because on the next turn, if you have a play with fire, a lightning strike, whatever it may be, fire that thing at the opponent's face, pay 1 red, and attack for 2 haste immediately. This combines so well with burn spells and is great against removal. And altogether, I think this could really be a fantastic addition to mono-red aggro, support that archetype that, has been, I guess lots of people that play the best of 1 ladder know how good mono-red can be, but I think for best of 3 for the big tournaments, mono-red is not quite good enough. And this could put it over the edge. But of course, saying that, there's Corpse Appraiser around and Graveyard Trespasser, of course, too. So if your opponent goes removal into one of those 2, exile this, not great. But nonetheless, if they don't have those, this can be really good. And to be fair, in response to those effects, you can actually cast a burn spell and then pay 1 red. It can be done at instant speed. You don't have to do it in your turn. Rampaging Raptor, 4-mana 4/4 trample haste. Alright, pretty decent stats already. For 3 mana, it can get 2/0. I mean, this is a nice upside. I mean, it's an upside, but it's not really. How often is this going to come up? I guess if you want to attack into a shield with this, can do so. Whenever a Rampaging Raptor deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls or battle that player protects. So kind of reminiscent of Questing Beast, really, in a lot of ways, being a 4-mana 4/4 trample with haste. I think Questing Beast didn't have trample, but it had the evasion that creatures of power 2 or less couldn't block it. So yeah, it doesn't have vigilance, to be fair, so it's gonna run really badly into some Wandering Emperors, which that's not great. But nonetheless, this could be a better curve topper than the red, I forgot the name, the 4-mana 3/3, the Raiju that the red decks play, because it is better in certain situations where, hey, your opponent has a planeswalker or a battle lying around. This combines really well, especially if you play a bunch of battles. Of course, this card gets a lot better, and it just is a solid body trample haste. Red usually likes those. Could see there's a tough curve topper in mono red. And here, he did Suga Kairi. This is one of the more exciting cards in the format. 5-mana 5/4 flying. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards and put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. So this is the Brainstorm attached to a creature. Always pretty cool to see. But this doesn't stop there. Just like the Hidetsuga in Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty, it does deal damage when it reveals stuff. And it does reveal stuff from the top of your library when it dies. And in a hefty way. Target opponent loses life equal to its mana value of the card you revealed. And if it's an instant or sorcery card, you may cast without paying its mana cost. You play Hidetsuga and Kairi, draw 3, so you dig deeper into your deck, and then from all the cards in your hand that you then have, you can choose 1, put it on, or 2, put 2 instant and sorceries back on top of your library. When this thing dies, you will just get to deal a ton of damage to your opponent's face, and also get to cast the card for free. And yeah, this can combo in Standard really nicely with Explosive Singularity, which is a 10-drop. So it already deals 10 damage when it's revealed, and then you can cast it for free and deals another 10 damage. This is a 2-card combo that deals 20 damage to the face. Pretty good. And it's also in Grixis colors. where you have a really good base in terms of cards you can play. Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, of course, to ramp you into Suga and Kairi. You gotta just make sure this thing dies. It doesn't get exiled, hopefully. Like, Ossification and Laydown Arms are pretty strong against this card, of course. But if it doesn't die, you can go into your turn and, for example, in the upkeep, when you've put an Explosive Singularity on top, you can just go for the throat, your own Hitsugu and Kairi. You play go for the throat anyways, right? It's a great card. And then you just kill it and deal 20 to them. And if they want to kill it via combat or anything else, they are risking that they just die on the spot. And your opponent will never know what cards you have. You might not have the Explosive Singularity have drawn, so you just put like 2 lands on top if you've had a really bad draw, who knows. But your opponent cannot really kill the Hitsugu because they might just straight up die. And then on the other hand, they might also die if you just have a way to kill it. So it's a really tricky spot to be in. And worst case, you have a 5/4 flyer that just drew you an extra card, selected a little bit here and there. This card is really, really strong. And I'm honestly surprised it is not a mythic rare. It just does so many things that are unique and powerful. I think we're going to see this card in Standard in conjunction with that combo of Explosive Singularity. Alright, Invasion of New Phyrexia is a X spell battle. When it comes to play, you get X/2/2 white and blue knight creature tokens and has 6 defense counters. This card is interesting. I mean, it's flexible. It is knight synergistic. There's some knight synergies in this set, and it flips into. So you can play this on turn 3, be a 2/2. That's pretty poor, of course. That's not great. But then, of course, you can also play it in late game. The flexibility is something that adds to a card. And what do we get on the backside? We get Teferi, Akosa of Self here, which +1, draw 2 cards, and discard 2 cards unless you discard a creature card. So here we already see a little bit of a stipulation to this card. It really wants you to play creatures. You get an Emblem of Knights you control, get 1/1, I have what, 1. Okay, so now it also wants you to have knights at best. I mean, of course, you already have knights when you've cast Invasion of New Phyrexia, so that second ability is fine in a deck that doesn't play a ton of knights. But the first one really has to have you have creatures, because just drawing 2 and discarding 2 isn't all that great. And then -3, tag X creatures you control. When you do, shuffle target non-land permanent and an opponent controls with mana value X or less into its owner's library. It's sort of like a convoke. Or, yeah, and kill a thing. It does get rid of a thing, and -3 lets Teferi also survive. Really, again, wants you to have a ton of creatures. So, hey, maybe you can play this in a knight deck. But altogether, I don't really see a home for this card quite yet. Because, again, it struggles in soldiers with Alia, Guardian of Frame, making it even more expensive. That's awkward. And then you really want to have efficient low to the ground creatures in an aggressively slanted deck. I was already being skeptical about the applications of Archangel Elspeth, and this one, you know, for an aggressive creature deck, kind of is similar. You really want to play Talia, Guardian of Frame if you're playing a wide aggressive deck, and this really doesn't support that well that card. So I'm a little bit down on it. I think it's going to be incredibly good and limited, of course, as just a huge bomb that makes a bunch of 2/2s and flips into a Teferi when you defeat the battle. But unconstructed, I just don't see this card do much. Next up, we have Cochlea and Yidaro. 2 red and 2 green. So it's a 6-drop, really expensive. Don't like that. But when it enters the battlefield, it either gains trample or haste. So hits them for 7 and trample. Doesn't keep the trample, unfortunately, which for future turns it will be able to be chump blocked. Or it just comes to play and fights something. Of course, in response to the fight, you can just go for the throat this thing, so it's not a guaranteed kill on an opposing creature. But the most important thing on this card, I think, comes at the 4-mana option on the discard, which says you can destroy an artifact or enchantment, shuffle the card into your library from your graveyard, and then draw a card. So that's a 2-for-1. That destroys something while drawing you a card. Sure, you get the added bonus of being able to redraw with a higher likelihood the Cochlea and Yidaro, of course. Technically speaking, you cannot deck yourself with Cochlea and Yidaro, right? Because no, actually that's not true, because you do draw a card, so you can't deck yourself. Never mind. But yeah, I think the flexibility is where this card could come into play in some sort of mid-rangey ramp deck. We saw, I've talked about, I think the card is called Izuri, the big dino, the red one that's really powerful when it comes to play. I could see some sort of green-red ramp deck, hopefully now has enough cards. And then this could be an addition to that archetype, being flexible as a disenchant that draws you a card, gives you some card advantage, or just a big haymaker that wins the game and stabilizes you. Invasion of Asgol. This is one of the, like I've taken a closer look at all the battles, of course, but not many of them strike me as constructed playable. This one does. For the reason that the front size is pretty reasonable already. You're playing red and black, and your opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker and loses 1 life. So that is a sorcery sweet Shieldred's Edict in a way. Of course, it doesn't go around tokens, unfortunately, but for 2 mana, they play whatever. You play this on 2 mana, you get a creature often. So that is kind of nice. What do we get on the backside? We get a 2/1 menace, and at the beginning of the end step, put a 1/1 card on Ash Rebirth. If opponent was put into the graveyard from the battlefield this turn. So whenever anything dies in combat, a blood token gets sacrificed, a treasure gets sacrificed, you destroy a creature of your opponent in your turn. This will grow and grow and grow. 2/1 menace, not that big, slow and growing, but nonetheless, this is a 2-for-1, and this is really where it matters. I don't know if you guys, I've read a comment under my latest video where someone was like, hey, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to have battles. I will just rather attack my opponent and deal like 5 damage on a battle. Your opponent has 20 life. A battle only has 4. And if you attack a battle, you get an advantage. You get a 2-for-1. That's what the battles do, right? They have multiple effects on them, and magic is all about resources. Sure, the life total is important as well, but if in a mid-range fight, I'd much rather attack an opposing battle than the opposing life total. That's for sure in most situations, because I want to have that extra creature, and then with that extra creature, I can deal more damage, and that adds up over the course of a longer game to win me that game on the matter of resources, and also to deal more damage. Because hey, if I ignore this battle on the board, then I wouldn't get this 2/1 menace creature that could then furthermore in the coming turns cause trouble for my opponent, attacking their life total and then causing them damage, recouping the damage I paid, in a way, exclamation marks, to get this battle defeated. So that's the reason why I think battle are interesting and perhaps good, but of course, there's a lot of different things that work into that, and you really do want to have ways to be able to attack the battles efficiently in constructed if you want to play them. You can't just put a battle in a control deck, of course, because hey, it's just going to sit there. The first effect, you got that, but then you will never be able to defeat it because you're playing defense all the time and you have sweepers and stuff. So you want to play it in decks that attack a lot or that have some sort of way to deal with them efficiently. And that really is the big stipulation. I think they're really interesting for limited though. We'll see about that. I think limited could cause very interesting scenarios that demand skill and decision making in terms of, hey, do I want to do this or that? Is this even good in my deck? And so on. Notorious Loremaster, 5 and a 3/5, Vigilant. At the beginning of the end step, exile target non-creature non card from your graveyard, create a 3/2 spirit token. So this already covers the be good against removal aspect of a 5-drop, where they really have to kill this before they get to your first end, before you get to your first end step, and then you create a 3/2. So if they then untap and have, like, I don't know, Ossification or Lay Down Arms, or go for the throat because they've been tapped out, you will still have a 3/2 left behind, which is a pretty decent body at least. It can, block, attack, whatever. And it does that every end step. So Quintarius Loremaster on face value produces a 3/2 every turn. You obviously want to play it in a deck that has a lot of non-creature, non-land cards. So sagas, instant sorceries, more controlling mid-range deck. Then that of course plays spells that go to the graveyard. You don't want to be the Mardu mid-range pile with lots of non-creature cards, but that don't go to the graveyard, right? And then the last ability is also pretty strong. If this thing sticks around even longer, you can choose a card that you exiled with it, sacrifice one of those spirits that you made, and turn the card, basically turn the spirit into the card that it used to be in a way, and cast it for free. So, hey, we've been just talking about combos like Explosive Singularity. You can technically exile Explosive Singularity from your graveyard with this, and then cast it. But you can also do it with other crazy stuff like Beyond the Multiverse, or what's it called, Portal to Phyrexia, because those are also non-creature cards. Those are artifacts and enchantments, right? But you can also get those back. Hey, so some synergies there, and an already pretty good card. You know, it's still a little narrow, so I don't know if it's going to see play, but I just want to mention it. Hey, for anybody that wants to brew around, this might be something to look into. And last but not least, Zogo and Ojutai. Ojutai, Dragonlord Ojutai, one of my favorite cards of all time. Maybe honestly my favorite card of all time. I made my first Grand Prix top 8 with Esper Dragons, where I used to play 4 Ojutai, of course. And it's finally back. It's red now as well, and it carries Zogo, which isn't what I expected, but hey, I'll take it. Flying Haste, when it has hexproof as long as it's entered the battlefield this turn. So Flying, Hexproof, and Haste are some of the most best abilities in Magic, and it gets all of them. Sure, the Hexproof only for 1 turn. It's still. And then when it hits the opponent, or when any dragon, for that matter, hits the opponent or battle, important little minor thing that comes up, in especially this set, look at the top 3 and put one of them into your hand. And you may even return one of those dragons to its own hand. So you can attack with this your opponent and then return it, and just simple stuff. You attack with this, boom, hit them, look at the top 3, take one of them, put it back into your hand, making it survive all the sorcery speed removal, especially if you're playing against a white opponent that has, Olification, Laydown Arms, Depopulate, Farewell, whatever it may be. Zogo and Ojutai just go around those by returning to your hand. It's a hefty mana investment, of course, if you have to play 5 mana every turn, but it is nonetheless an upside that you can utilize or not. So this card has a lot of depth to it. And you know what I really like about it too? It seems to be a fantastic battle defeater. You know, it comes in there with haste, with hexproof, and just swings at a battle with 4 defense counters and blows it all up. And then you just return it back to your hand, or you draw a card, whatever you want to do. Like a lot of things around this card make me excited. And even though it's 3 colors, and I'm not going to mention any of the other 3 color mythics that are in the set because I'm not excited about them. They seem very narrow and difficult to make work, and they're in weird color combinations. Jeskai, of course, is not one of the supported color combinations out of Streets of New Capenna, so that is not great, but nonetheless, we have a ton of dual lands in Standard right now, and we can make a mana-based work with this. And also, we have Invasion of Takia, which is the battle that synergizes with dragons. So I'm certainly going to look into that, and this is going to be one of the first decks I'm going to build around Zogo and Ojutai and Invasion of Takia, a little dragon-themed deck. All right, and that is the end of this video. I want to quickly state that I'm one of the lucky ones that has access to the early access event. So I have one of those nice accounts with all the cards, and I will be able to play on Thursday at 7 p.m. European time, like 9 a.m. Pacific, to I guess that's 6 p.m. European. And try out the new cards. So that's really exciting, and I hope to see you there. I'm going to be live on Twitch, of course, and I'm going to probably put some of the content also on YouTube for you to watch later. And of course, my Twitch VODs are also free to watch, so you can just check them out if you're not a sub or anything in the aftermath. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little add-on to the big review that I did yesterday, and I wish you a very good rest of the day. Bye bye. Take care.